Hey, it is your buddy. Peace and harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on a great viewer question that's to talk and discern a little bit. Discern means to see and decide. So to have like a discerning palate, to be able to know what's good or bad. To be able to discern if you are being targeted or emotionally manipulated. Whether it's a male or a woman, we're going to kind of break those down. Before we get started, I want to give a huge shout out to those of you who have recently donated to the channel. LL, thank you so much for your donation and support. And definitely, if you want to support the channel, there's a PayPal Donate Now button. You can become part of our alert series as well. So check those out, as well as we have a huge volume of videos to check out similar topics. So let's go on this one. Emotional manipulation. How do you know if you're being targeted? How do you know if you're under a spell? How do you know if that big storm cloud is raging in and all of a sudden you feel powerless, panic-stricken, and either want to fight it, flight it, or just basically freeze in analysis, otherwise known as like emotional stalling? Sort of waffling back and forth, not knowing what to do, and spending an inordinate amount of time there because of sort of like emotions, and which are overwhelming thoughts, and making it difficult to discern and decide, meaning to make a clear decision and go with it. So in other words, when you're in a manipulated situation, it's, like this. It's a cut, it's a jab, it's a good pat, it's a slap, it's emotional manipulation. When you're feeling emotionally manipulated, you can basically, determine this because you're constantly affected by their mood. If you are constantly, overly affected by something in the environment, it's not you. It's not only your weakness. This is your intuition, instinct. You must understand, revere, and respect the vagus nerve. That's the longest nerve in the body that travels down, into the solar plexus. And when you really have, your gut feeling basically should precede you when you're on a discerning path, when you're able to be clear and not emotionally manipulated. Cut down, minimized, told that your feelings don't matter. They're not worthy. You're making them up. You are wrong. Okay, when someone comes at you with this emotional brute force, they're looking to start trouble, start a rumble. Okay, you think you're, they're challenging you. And some fights are challenging because, you're staying right here, but you're not getting lost in that middle emotional manipulation zone where you're going on a true emotional roller coaster. And usually an emotional manipulator, there always be something in it for the win. They are usually, in my mind, emotionally jockeying for a number one spot. In other words, no matter what, they want their overall visage, their overall, no matter what you've done, no matter how, emotionally manipulated, when you feel that they're forceful and you're not listening. So you feel things are going one way here. No, this is a two-way road. Open up your eyes a little bit more. That's the mindfulness perspective, is to really be able to face and recognize and acknowledge. So it's truly gaining a perspective, learning the difference within your own body, how you can tell and discern and decide. Oftentimes those very skills are dulled down, told you're not sharp, told you don't matter, your feelings are wrong, There's always, and then there's usually a win. Why is that? Because it's always ruled the discourse, the conversation, or in their mind, the relationship. They have an insatiable need for power and control. In moderation and give and take, okay, both people should be able to experience input, insight, contribution, validation, feeling whole. Okay, not feeling that you're being emotionally stabbed at, jabbed at, slicing you apart and throwing you on the table and just taking you through the wood chipper, and you're like, I can't even recognize, you're just like screaming bloody murder. If you're ruled by their mood, you're going to have these ruminations, which means you're like trying to work out their negativity. And it's kind of like trying to teach someone for them to ride a bike by like, I'll ride it. They need to ride it. They need to balance. They need to work things out. They need to come to kumbaya. Okay, they need to recognize and validate other people's boundaries and standards, otherwise known as their needs, their perspective, their wants. These are very valid and real. This is not phony baloney, made up, liverwurst baloney, whatever else you want to, they're saying that they're junking you out. When you're sort of emotionally manipulated, you feel sort of like that you're junk, in other words, that you don't have that discerning ability to decide, to discern. It's their needs sort of trump, paramount, take up, rest their stiletto heels on their needs. Basically, they're not in it to be as equals. They're going to try to sort of just get, there's always something more up, more right, more of a title, more of just, you can feel a sheer weight sort of being thrust against you, even though you don't see it. You feel a tension. Emotional manipulators will create tension where there is none. And, if you have a lot of this empathy, or you've been shut down, you really learn to bottle up your emotions. You really learn to stuff them down. What do people stuff them down with when they're in an emotional manipulator situation? This is a great question. And another viewer that sort of ties in with that sort of Peter Pan effect is that they don't really grow up because of this. They don't sort of become responsible, accountable, eye-to-eye people. They're always trying to do a Puff the Magic Dragon and show, just cast your attention as if you're going to get caught by their next shiny emotion, that their emotions are, basically are always in. And this is a problem, because there's going to create this sort of striad hierarchy through your life. And a lot of people, they don't want to be an underling. A lot of people, they don't want to be a no man or a no woman, unheard. A lot of people don't want to live with bottom up or stuffed emotions. Okay, your buddy here, peace and harmony. I've developed health conditions, which I don't, go out into, but it definitely can, it can definitely, if you bottle down your emotions and don't have like that discourse at your need level, at your real, no, that's not real. I mean, that's the brainwashing, that's the gaslighting, that is casting you into a script of denial, which then leads to self-denial, which becomes really problematic later in life, into your adulthood and beyond. It can really take over someone's entire life until you learn to recognize and acknowledge and recognize what an emotional manipulator is. So they have difficulty sort of being in that present moment. Why? Because that's where your needs and their needs, or fears basically, are going to come up. And their fears are oftentimes not shared. They have certain shames. They're not that tall. They're not that whatever. They have, whatever, maybe some sort of physical thing that they're dealing with, that they feel that they are always trying to hide. And so when you have an emotional manipulator, someone who's narcissistic or psychopathic or sociopathic, so they sort of, rather than allowing you to arrive and at your own thoughts and conclusions, which is so vital and necessary for your self-support and growth, whether it become your relationships, your marriage, your contribution in society, so that you don't get broken off emotionally, where you feel broken, and that's that's an effect of emotional manipulation. So I really like to discuss like the cause and effect, because there's a lot of sources that want to pull one over on you, okay? And then you don't realize what trap are you falling into. People don't realize until you really sort of grow up. And so if you've had a lot of relationships with emotional manipulator, it's like they're trying to tug at your growth. You'll feel that you can't move forward, that there's something always sort of catching your eye, a snag in your rhythm. And because of that, it doesn't allow you an emotional freedom, which is built into maturity and responsibility. So it's like the good stuff, but the narcissist or the psychopath, they're going to bet on manipulation. They'd rather sell the sizzle than the steak. They would rather you look at the shiny, the flashy, whatever it is that they're going to lead with, their car, their headache, their brand, whatever it is that they're wearing, their hair, their chest, their fanny. I mean, they will emotionally manipulated their fanny. That's such a funny word. There was an Italian restaurant where we grew up in the town next door, in Evanston. I think it was called Fanny's. What is it, Fanny's? And you had to wear like a jacket when you went into the restaurant. Otherwise, you couldn't go. And they'd have like all these. You had to wear like either like a dressy, and the men had to wear. It was required that you would wear like a sport coat. And if you didn't bring one, they had like 15 in the front door that you could suit up. We're going to have a nice dinner here, was kind of the message of this restaurant. So if you look at something like that, when you pair up with an emotional manipulator, you don't feel that you can walk together. There's a walking apart. There's a walking behind. It's a feeling as if they're always trying to tickle you with their foot feather, or whatever their feather is, their tail feather, to try to, it gets them riled up. That's their addictive quality. Emotional manipulators will kind of cycle through that. And they always take precedence. So then you can feel like so the problem with that, so that's a cause. Emotional manipulation is a style of that communication, I feel, that's based on someone wanting to direct, to control, to take the helm, but it's like they can't do that to you. They can't, it's like their wish, their emotion, energy and motion. It's their wish, and you can feel it, then it can become against or combative, or sort of in, not in, like in a concussion movement. It's sort of in a very jarring, emotional manipulators, you'll feel a jarringness. It's, because they're trying to tip the scales. And eventually people get so tipped off, tipsy, whatever, tipped over, that they're just then living, and they don't recognize that they're then being ruled by someone else's favor, someone else's fancy. They're not asking you to the party and saying, put on your dress, put on your suit coat. We're going to have an eye to eye, and we deserve this together. It's not, there is no together. It's sort of them, and aren't you so lucky to bask in their brilliance, is usually an emotional manipulator. And the problem with this is that they sort of downgrade or stamp on other people's feelings. How? By cutting them off. The digital age. How do you do that? One-word sentences, emojis. Angry faces. I mean, it's like we're getting back to the hieroglyphics over here. You better learn the new emoji language, or you're going to be out. You're like, what does this even mean? Wizard, broken sword, then the world map, like, what does this even mean? Like, why are you emojing this to me? And you can't figure it out. So you're back and forth, let's meet, I'm at work, I'm with the kids, all these, a roller coaster. Okay, that is not fun. You're not, this will oftentimes get people very disoriented and sort of without focus. And so that's a real problem. If you're with an emotional manipulator, they don't really allow that natural focus to emerge. They distract it. You have a natural gut, drive, something that you are good at that is to be acknowledged and validated. But the narcissist, see, or a psychopath or emotional manipulator, they basically view others as a tool to their end. So are you going to help me get to the second floor where I can then go to the third floor and up from there? In a company, in a family, these people are creating hierarchies or making them more pronounced where they don't need to be. I'm the this, I'm the that, it's like declaring through judgment, and that your sense of discernment or good judgment is sort of whacked out, is their message. Don't worry about it. You are not whacked out. Like, it's just, you've been hit by a smooth criminal, Michael Jackson, but it's not that cool. Hey, it's kind of like, this is disturbing. This is disruptive to me in my feeling body, my emotional etheric body. And eventually it will break your body down. So it's kind of like, always when in a relationship with an emotional manipulator, it's like they're always gunning you forward. And you're like, I'm scared to death. I can't see anything. So I'm just going to crouch down. And you basically you feel almost everything. You can feel like there's an emotional blackout. Like, I don't remember that whole decade. I don't remember, because it's all about trying to keep zero gain, and your body is going to fight it. But, you're trying to fight, what you need to know. And so there's this overriding principle. When people begin to think too much, that's generally the ego running the wagon, okay? And so you can say, is this ego? Am I asking too much of this person or this situation? Am I then being emotionally greedy? Make yourself accountable when you're in the face of this emotional manipulation. Am I leaning too much into this? Am I sort of in this overwhelmed feeling and thinking? Or do I have the ability to discern and decide? Or am I being forced? Am I having to be too tight-lipped and then bottle it down, where then you're stuffing it down with food, gambling, chronic debting, other chronic sadness, chronic this doesn't work. I mean, those are like the ramifications, the waves that come out after emotional manipulation, because you have to, you get disoriented, but basically your focus will begin to bring you back onto land, back onto a track. And then you're like, you have to sort of recover and acknowledge and validate it without knocking yourself down. And they will use sort of they know your weaknesses, so they know where you want to be bonded or together, and then they will use that against you. Meaning, this is really important. You want to have this Friday night, this date night, and then, you're looking forward to it, and then they pull something where they get a phone call, they can't make it, they have to talk to someone, and you're all worked up and romantic, and then your hopes are shot down. And so, and they're not afraid to push others' buttons. And I mean, you can get along harmoniously and have, back and forth, but the emotional manipulator is sort of always jutting forth, meaning they're just sort of wanting to be the number one, the only in the picture, meaning no matter what it is, they are the best of the best. It's sort of their proclamation when you don't have to be the best of the best. How about being your best, that person's best? But they're clouding and shrouding that in a mystery, so you can't really have the eye to eye, because to them, they might then shrink down. They're afraid of confronting what they feel is challenges. If you're just trying to have a frank discussion, ask a normal question, they just won't even ask you or treat you as if you're wrong for asking it, meaning minimize you, infantize you, cause you to leap into regression. Regression, the Freudian term, basically when people get stuck at certain stages of development, they don't grow beyond it. They get stuck. They don't learn to meet certain growth periods. From the toileting to, he's the one who got into all that anal retentive, anal expulsive, sort of personality types. And the good news, though, is, realize then the result of the cause. So it's when you can learn then through the privacy of these videos to see, acknowledge, and validate what do you feel emotional manipulation is. When are you being adversely affected? Meaning there's something in your environment that's always nagging for your attention, rather than your ability to sort of get into what you need and want, and then your bucket list starts to emerge. The problem with emotional manipulators, maybe people have tried and tried again, and they haven't had certain successes, so people give up. That's how deep, how effective, and how affected people can become from emotional manipulators. They don't grow into be the blossoming person who they're supposed to be. They don't live in strength. They live in weakness. They live in uncertainty. They live in fear. And that sort of this constantly collapsing situation where they will collapse a moment, meaning just it's an emotional addiction. It's their emotional priority. And this is when relationships can really enter into a bit of poison, not just toxicity. You've heard of toxic environments. Think of like a train spill that just derailed with the, the oil going into the fields and destroying all this habitat. That's a toxic spill. But it's then poison to that life. Poison, meaning the big bottle with the no X. Deadly, okay, lethal, not to be, bounced back from. This is not about like being playful or showing that you're spunk. A lot of people will explain and justify. Well, I'm always shut down. I've accepted this. But until you get to a point like I'm missing out, especially now in the digital age, you can continue to be walled in by your past if you allow it, if you let it. But if that past is weakness, then you must let it go. David Hawkins, tons of material, letting go. Okay, and Power versus Force. We can look at those books, and you can understand the difference, because kinesthetically within your body is how you feel it, it's like how you resonate it, and your truth is particularly set up in the first 7 years of your life. So if you had emotional manipulation going on then, so you're going to have a lot of this sort of play off of like the middle. It's going to have some back and forth instability, certainty, uncertainty, and then how big do you want these swings to be is what you must recalculate yourself after you've been sort of affected, meaning your capability for discernment, to discern, to decide, which means to make a new, better, well-informed decision, versus where you kind of feel like I'm uninformed, I'm not quite getting it, I'm staying sad for too long, I can't get out of the bed, I can't. You're dancing to I can't. And then, but the problem is that people who have been emotionally manipulated or in relationships with an emotional manipulator, oftentimes they're rewarded for they can't. In other words, they're kept small. They're kept in the dark. They're kept in the narcissist test tube. They're like, according to their whims and needs, to eventually they'll just cast it off, and people then feel lost. This is when they start to really come to kumbaya, come to Jesus. I need to discern and decide. That's an advanced state. Once you can learn to acknowledge and recognize. So to acknowledge means to say, I know what this is. Hitherto, before, not knowing. So even though I didn't know this before, what I'm really understanding now is, in my hurt, in other words, people will hold on to the hurt and they'll keep hurting. Their bodies see the problem with post-traumatic stress syndrome after really intense or prolonged or long-standing emotional abuse, emotional manipulation, physical abuse, emotional, psychological, spiritual. Okay, the spirit is then that etheric field that has that higher order thinking. Okay, that helps you to discern and decide, but it is very difficult to inhabit that space, almost like a musical chairs. You go, man, I got to get out of this seat. This is not taking me anywhere, or I don't, they'll put you in sort of a seat that you feel you're half clinging on, and clinging on for dear life, for understanding, and thinking that this is what is normal or all that you can become. See, that's the fallacy, that's the falseness of these sort of relationships, is they sort of keep you bewildered and thinking that you can't really decide or be backed up, supported, and see the fruits of your own labor, or what it is to be strong and not fearful, to have that sort of I'm okay-ness, sort of. That is not a space that people have a very difficult space, very difficult time inhabiting that I'm okay space, or I'm competent, I can do this, or accepting structure and routine, because if hither in an emotional situation, boundaries and standards don't go into deciding. It's all, they're always the rule making, and then they are the rule breakers. They can be lawless. When it gets really severe, to the point where you can be emotionally manipulated out of a relationship, an entire family, your schooling, your higher education, your even growth, your drive to even go out and believe in and seeing the glory and feeling good about things, sort of hitting new ground. They will keep your world very, very small. And you can identify and say, I know my world is becoming too trodden over, and you can say that regressive, and if you label that, if you've been sort of targeted or felt the victim of an emotional, manipulator, taking you out of your space, taking you out of your inhabitants, taking you out, just not feeling that you are grounded or rooted, and then therefore have a sense of structure and comfort with that. So if emotional manipulators, they will blow out all that out the window, and it'll basically be very formidable pain, emotional pain we're talking about here, which then will then manifest or become physical pain, physical atrophy, physical blowing, not finding yourself, or feeling that you're not finding yourself or rising to your best ability, sort of feeling a gap. So it's because of that emotional manipulator. They will keep that gap as their truth, because they have that need to emotionally control. And if you're then not allowed to have any engagement, it's use it or lose it. You'll become like a weeping willow, just wherever the wind blows. If the wind is going 45 miles that way, emotional manipulator, your leaves are going that way too. It is like the wind is like their mood. It can be very playful, very delightful, very inviting, and that's how you should be felt, as as a similar pleasant element in life. but they can't validate that. The sun, the light, the wind, this movement, this sort of natural inclination of life. Once you've been made too small and you emerge behind it, you'll be able to see and give perspective and then own it, meaning I see that I can see, acknowledge, and validate now when you have like hurt feelings, fear for your health, fear for your belonging, fear for your employment. Oh, here it goes, here it goes. I'm gonna get canned, trashed, fired. I'm out of, always sort of expecting this worst, sort of having this expectation. Because that has been so brought into that storm. An emotional manipulator will bring that in to stir your emotional pot as if they're trying to stir things up. This is this is what they do. And it's always, as if their problems are more serious. And so a lot of people who have been sort of on the receiving end of emotional manipulation, they don't really get a chance to stir their own sauce in a certain way. They don't get a chance to have that exchange, that same barter system in a more harmonious interaction. There's always got to be a let go, a something, a thump, until they learn to soften it or sort of round it out. And just saying, you know what, I've had it enough from having these emotional time bombs basically go off. And saying, that, and what does that cause you to do? In other words, does it cause you to bring more grief into your life? Are you like always testing, is this poison? Is this still bad? And then like how many, and or living in the extreme, can be toxic. That stress is where I'm trying to show you can be as a poison. And it's sort of like a ongoing sort of exposure to the stress chemicals, the corticosteroids, the neurohormones of stress, adrenaline, the fight or flight, all those neurochemicals seething through the body as if that is a normal way to live, as if you're always just looking out and afraid of some emotional dynamite that's going to blow off, blow up basically your inhabitants, your room where you're living. So it's kind of like people carry this, this feeling of, it's brokenness, I guess you would, but it's not broken. But it's a feeling that is bestowed. So it's kind of like, oh, this is the gift from this relationship. If you want to, this is, what did they bring? Did they bring a big vase of flowers that are blooming and you can smell them together and they can follow your whims and go, oh, that's really great that you want to do this. And, you've kind of been able to do a little bit, together. It's not just only one hand doing it all. Feeling like you're playing second fiddle to someone and not having that or that fair trade-off, meaning they're keeping you little, keeping you small. Why would they do that? So that they can trump you, overpower you, control. And so a lot of people, once they've lived in the shadows or they find it very difficult. They don't even know what it is, or they're fearful to go out. They don't try to develop a bucket list. So that's why I want to help you with these questions. And even though I was hurt and the world was made to feel so small, what I really have a desire to become and share is, and have this admittance to yourself. Even though this seemed really fearful, I really stopped here all the time. I haven't been able to go through this, where it's always sort of haunting you, and sort of look at it and say, what is this really about? And what do I really need to discern and decide? And where am I okay? Like, let's look at some more objective facts rather than just the emotions. Realize in the moment when the emotional manipulator is emojiing you, doing the text fight, the mad texting, things go too far. Step out. Just don't engage just say to your, learn to discern and decide. I have learned to discern and decide when this happens. I need to just shut my mouth and shut the engagement and not interact with that energy. So that means in your heart moving forward, meaning they could have done or said something, that really needs to be looked at, that's serious, so you can discern and decide. But if they're always sort of kicking you off, or you're sabotaging yourself through drinking, drugs, overeating, gambling, staying afraid, overworking, all the addictions, that can occur as a result of not wanting to see something which is right there. And then the longer that it's put off, the more enormous or gigantic the feeling will feel and become, meaning consuming of you within your body. This is consuming me. This is consuming me badly. This isn't working out anymore. You can say and admit to yourself. And and then it's all about making like a little change. Obviously we're here to help people who have been victimized, abused, taken advantage of, exploited. Okay, so just think about, there's people who are, there's a lot of sex trafficking going in the news right now. Just think how emotionally manipulated those young girls and women, or even boys, would have been. So if you understand, if you can see in other situations where emotional manipulation is going on, obviously for the end of, giving those people funds for their travel expenses, which are like, your travel expenses are like $20,000 to get you from here to here, and you're going to pay this in the, 10 years, never getting it paid off. It's manipulation, it's exploitation, it's taking advantage of kids in their youth for their ends. So the problem with emotional manipulators, narcissists, or psychopath is that they will utilize others and sort of treat them unto an end, unto itself. Meaning you're just there as a decoy, or meaning to satisfy their needs, as a stand-in, a filler, and sort of not of your own self, being real, authentic, genuine, being able to be good at something. Emotionally manipulating. What is the message? Because that becomes what's percolating, and then becomes the ruminating thoughts. It literally is like the brew that comes from the bean that people are drinking. And you have to realize what the effects and where it has sort of overwhelmed and gotten those seesaws really out of whack, out of syncing, and you're not liking the feeling, or feeling like you're in your best space. There's a feeling of your countenance, your face, where you can be relaxed. You don't have to be constantly worried or fearful or blocking of manipulation attempts, because the inner body, the physical body, which is run by a lot of the subconscious mechanisms, the brainstem, and then the limbic brain, which is like the reptilian brain, that's the thing that will bite at things, like a snake or a reptile, and fight, and that's what advertisers use to get you, biting. Oh God, God help it. 6 seconds, man. How can people judge and discern, they're just, oh, I'm going to get this big blown up love sack. What? It's just crazy stuff, what it can do. And it can keep you on a cycle, sort of always doing and undoing, doing and undoing, doing and undoing. Constantly getting ready, but feeling that you're not at the show. I'm not there yet, peace and harmony. Well, that's where you need to kind of protect yourself, have self-compassion, positive self-reference, okay, needs to come in, kind of like that inner hand within, sort of a positive self-reference where there was none. You can't do the positive self-reference. You're not a positive self-reference. You're a disappointment, positive self-reference. Your voice has to triumph and trump them. I don't care if it's the, the leader of the company, the country. Your thoughts, opinions, feelings are real. They matter. They are significant. They are important. You are important. You need to check that out. You need to check out that feeling. And not just like on the bobblehead important, that your sentience, your alignment, listening to your heart, learning to stop and slow down in a moment where you're entering into fields of the unknown, or you're feeling positive self-reference. You need to develop an inner countenance, because they sort of will take your face, meaning taking your identity and putting it on something that they want to turn the eyes on and off now, ears now. You are not a play wagon. You are not a play toy. You are not being played. You don't have to be a player. You do not have to be someone else's feel-good toy. Okay. You might have thought that was the way you thought relationships should be engaged in. This is how you present yourself. This is what you go. This is how you are used to, like, navigating yourself in the world. And you're like, you know what? I don't want to be that way. I don't like that feeling. That's regressing, going back, and then, regressing, pooping the pants as an adult. What's going on here? Crying fits, gaining, not being in touch with your passions or your senses, meaning you're eating too much. Your discernment has gone out the window. It's just like one pie is one serving. It says 6 servings on the box. You got to get back a little bit to, some semblance, and that positive self-reference, meaning that you don't have to do yourself, meaning do you, and develop that positive self-reference. And you don't have to live from that sort of outside superficial in, which is, the narcissist will really support how good you are to them, even if it means in the same sentence not good for you. So you have to learn to understand, to discern. This is a really important word. And it's sort of like going no contact, where instead of hiding the good from yourself, you're learning to enjoy the possibility of other opportunities. There's more possibilities entering your life, and not the ones that tear you down, but the ones that fill you up. People might get so distant from their dreams. Well, let's get back to it. Get out your little bucket list. And even if it's something small that you're going to do, if you do it daily with repetition and experience, you'll learn to navigate your own emotional landscape, which could be, it's important for you to learn a trust and to discern and decide. What is discernment? Discernment is the ability to judge well. Okay? Oftentimes, this ability is what is not required or eliminated. Loused up, messed up, told does not matter. Is discernment, your ability, like, to understand what is a red flag. Like, we're at the party, you didn't talk to me, we're married, and we and then this happens, and you're losing the ability for discernment, to learn the ability to judge well. So that gets really eradicated. And it's perception in the absence of judgment with a view to obtaining spiritual guidance and understanding. Oh boy, this is not getting woo-woo. This is getting wow. I mean, you gotta, realize, that ain't so cool, being or feeling in a specific way, that it's causing you to withdraw in specific ways. And so discernment also is in Christian context, the perception in the absence of judgment. An emotional manipulator is usually acting without good judgment, but they're feigning that with a view to obtaining, perception in the absence of judgment. So foregoing your judgment, good or bad, stop evaluating, stop labeling. Just learn the skill. This is a skill. This is a skill. We're talking about an emotional skill, okay? It's all this is. Can it be life-changing? Yes. Can it bring more confidence to you? Yes. Can it bring more trust to you? Yes. Can it bring more clarity, purity, truth, and the ability to fend off disease, meaning stop the disease causing behavior and symptoms, meaning the feelings that cause the thoughts and then the behavior. So oftentimes if the subconscious, so many of those other layers have been sort of not explored, not gone to, just sort of mined through. And those skills, those layers aren't developed, but they can develop. Neuroplasticity. Dr. Joe Dispenza, read his book, watch his TED Talks, learn about neuroplasticity, meaning you can learn. You're not stuck in the rut. You're not always going to be stubborn, lost, angry, unhappy, all these different things. So judgment, this discernment is very important. Because this is really what they would call wisdom. When you have wisdom, meaning you can't be pushed over this time. You can't be thrown off the hook. You're not going to fly off the handle. You're not going to shout it from the rooftop. You're not going to, jump on top of your car and jump up and down or act like, a child with a temper tantrum, because that's the regressed behavior. That's and if they can keep you infantilized, treating you like a baby, oftentimes maybe not even acknowledging you with like grown-up words, like as if you don't have the depth, as if you're just, you're nobody. If you don't, it's this whole like absolute, you're a nobody if you're not So that's pretty scary, okay? So that'll cause a lot of fear, and then all those other conscious layers to be not entered into, meaning I'm too fearful to think. I can't think. What do you mean? It just doesn't go, or where's discernment? And so oftentimes discernment is a very, very important skill. It is a skill. It is a tool that you can work on daily if you're in the presence of emotional manipulators, meaning if these people are in your family, at your workplace, at your extended family, grocery stores. People who just seem to sort of be overly bossy. And discernment is the quality of being able to grasp, okay, with your mind. I can grasp this. I've got this, I've got this versus I don't got this. So before, where you said, oh, I don't got this, could you possibly say, I've got this? Think about that for a moment. Before, when you were taught that you don't got this, and you do got this, meaning a wisdom, a discernment, a skill, because it is that inner ability for discernment that gets corrupted by an emotional manipulator hand. They will break it down to the point where it is non-existent, snuffed out like an extinguisher, just candle is out, blown out, light the candle, light a candle, take a relaxing nap and saying, it's okay to exist. It's okay that I have good judgment. I don't need to lean on others or depend, because people who are in that regressive, if they've been around a lot of manipulations, emotional manipulators, they unequivocally want to have a vision of others being small, like put you into the playpen, even as an adult. Oh, go, you can't work here, you can't here, you know, just trying to keep you into a very small zone, which is painful. It's like trying to become something and then always being sort of put into the dark without exposure to the very light or whatever it is, the photosynthesis, some sort of process that is not happening, like learning, getting good grades. You know, so people who have been in the victim of emotional manipulator will have trouble learning. Their body can't just be there in a deep possessed way, like for someone who has learned. So if you see someone who has learned, they can go about things in a specific way and not get snagged up. And then so people who are yet unlearned, they always feel that they're going to get, there's always a snag. Oh, and then everything is unraveled. Things need to go from front to, things need to be able to be processed and have a back and forth. So a lot of our viewers have, asked and inquired, why? Why then did they stay with me? Why is there the good stuff? Well, what were they receiving from you? And what were you not discerning? What were you, so if you can say, gosh, what I didn't see then is I didn't see that I needed to believe in myself, or I didn't need, I didn't see that I had certain qualities that were being degraded or made almost sacrificed to them. Like, in other words, you don't feel that you're in command. That's the emotional manipulator who will keep others regressed, emotionally regressed, regression, all these sort of things where you do need to be able to come home at the end of the day, put on something comfortable, maybe keep on something comfortable the entire day. What's wrong with being comfortable? You can see certain things, you say, what are certain B states that I'm really missing? And write 1 through 20. What are certain B states, meaning that I want to experience or feel, that I'm really missing? And write those down, because oftentimes you feel that, that you haven't had a chance to act on them, not act out on them, but act on them. Certain things that you've wanted to do, that are a little, and to be bold, and to what way are you truly bold? Not bold for someone else, but bold for your own, in your own way, because there's a big difference. Emotional manipulators want you to show up and put on a show. They want their supply to be an extension of themselves, which means they can't see people, or they're afraid to, emotionally fearful. Just think of the trafficking situation, severe example, where they're trying to utilize for others for their ends or means. I mean, these don't have to be bad criminals. These are people in everyday situations, and will cause a lot of people to not grow professionally, to not grow emotionally, to not grow in relationships. They'll keep them stunted until you're doing your own emotional stunts and you're going, man, I got to get myself up, because I need to be able to get through something myself, like take care of your own health, show up to the doctor, get your car fixed, other challenges that you need to be adult, do some, however you need to do some positive self-reference, self-compassion, recognizing instead of, and saying, and giving time to reflect rather than just cover up, and realize that, there might be other certain then B states or hobbies that you have or want to stop deliberating back and forth, but then making, something, a positive step, and then realizing a positive result, and keep going, keep, a little bit, instead of regressing. Oh, I just did it again. I just, and I did this to the bank account or this person, or I cried, or I broke down, or I went in a meltdown. And eventually you're going to say, no, this is having an inappropriate, there's an inappropriateness of this. And I acknowledge and validate that. Acknowledge and validate. So, and especially, it's the ability to grasp something that's obscure. Meaning it's not easy, it's obscure, it's not quite like it's like you're developing your sixth sense, your x-ray vision. You know, turn on the red light and get some positive self-reference, or turn on the blue light. You know, usually it's a positive, if you can just send positive light into your body and just say, light particles that are emblazoned with truth, you know, and then sealing that with different layers in your energetic body can be very, very important, very helpful when you acknowledge these different etheric fields in the body, in reality. So, and it can, discernment can bring you things too. So meaning, if you're having trouble feeling like you're allowing, emotional manipulators, they don't want to allow. So by virtue of that equal proximity of energy, equal energy exchange, there is a lack of allowing. So the person, by virtue of them not being allowed to, they lose a skill, a wisdom for allowing, you know, them to inhabit a certain space that is real and genuine and important, and their skills are at, that would take them to a whole different trajectory than just being obscured, you know, being of obscurity. I think it's like people have the fear like that they're going to be obscured, which is like you're not even existing. It's like the existential, there's an existential fear, I think, that happens as a result of certain emotional manipulations where you're not able to discern, to judge and decide for yourself, where it becomes sort of a trigger that is unmonitored, unmanaged, and unrecognized. So the ability to recognize and see it before it happens and saying, you know, I'm not too early on this one. Let me get in early on this change. And then get in on making that change, whatever that bucket list is. It might seem you just might want to go to a hot tub. You might just want to go to a spa day. You might want to do that sort of every week, or do something. It doesn't have to be even that structured, but having at least something that is paying you off in dividends internally is what you're searching for. You know, and it might just be as easy as finding a better blanket, finding a better cushy pillow, finding a better pair of socks to sleep in, or not to sleep in, or throwing out some junk that is in your house, your building, your garage, your mind, you know, whatever is that's sort of weighting you down, that's keeping you from that feeling that I have wisdom. And because once you have that, if an emotional manipulator comes along, you sort of know better. And you say, oh, peace and harmony, I always want to be that and know better. Like, I know I can identify this. I'm getting this skill. You're sharpening your skill. You got to take time to sharpen the blade. I mean, it's, if you just keep going at it in life and you don't take time off to sort of recharge and reflect and look at these things a little bit, life can go very fast and become very hectic, and you can, you know, you might not be where your course you want it to be. So you can course correct in the present moment. Just course correct, meaning I don't want to end up, I can see beyond sort of the fallacy of certain decisions. I can see beyond the red flags. I don't have to look up to this person, because I know that, you know, I can look up to me. And then positive self-reference needs to come back into style for you. It's a faculty. It's a discernment, acuteness. So an acute sense, just, you got to be able to catch it. You got to be able to even write it down. Carry a pen, carry a tablet, write down, and not just only like tablet style, but write it down. Like, I'm going to this museum. We are going to clear out this whole track in the garage. I am going to get rid of this junk. I am going to get better. You've got to, if you can sharpen the tools, you'll get through it easier. Think of like a great steak knife versus like a dull knife that can't get through. You have to push and push. You have to then, if you can sharpen your ability, the skill of discernment, which means to discern, judge, and decide. Oh, that's not going to be good for me. Oh, I've seen where that leads. You know, I'm gonna rein it in here. So where can you rein it in? Your own emotions, and then just go galloping off into a sunset, a sunrise, a blissful meeting, a blissful expo. Maybe you need to start attending conferences. Maybe you need to look into a business you want to start. Maybe you've got a painting within you. Maybe you've got something else. You need to acknowledge, validate, and have discernment, and realize like what kind of margin do you have and where can you loosen up a little. I think will help you sort of liberate and free from the hands, which will really try to get you into a stranglehold, baby. Whether that used to be the music back then, I've got you in a stranglehold, baby. I mean, as if that was an attractive thing for a man to do. Well, under my thumb, I mean, you can figure it out. How do these things play into your life? These are large lessons. These are really important skills that can get you to slow down and say, hey, I've got to check this out. When I was in college and studying health and wellness and these things, it's like read the labels. I always got into like reading the labels that were in the products, and I would be the one who, back in the day, in the early mid 80s, I was the ones walking into McDonald's with a box of Special K and going, I'll just have a glass of milk. I mean, vegetarian was not a thing. Paleo, Alto, none of this was a thing. But I had I knew instinctively a lot of that food was not super good for you. It just didn't feel right. My body was sensitive to the processing of those junk chemicals or junk, overly processed foods. The hamburger bun being like 2 molecules away from plastic or whatever it is. I mean, it might be great stuff, but there are certain things where you need to learn to discern and decide and realize that oftentimes that skill can be made very dull if you're surrounded by a lot of emotional manipulators, meaning exercise your judgment. If they don't listen, find someone who will, because they're not going to help you get anywhere. They're going to make sure you don't go anywhere. Those are the situations to avoid. Those are, your walls. Those are the people who have erected walls and not made bridges. So look at the difference. Know when do you have a bridge or when do you have a wall. Discern and decide what is in your best interest, and learn to understand what emotional manipulation is so you don't become a target or an assailant moving forward. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. I hope that these videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and for goodness sake, please donate for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Peace out. Have a beautiful day.